Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for coming. I'm going to give about a 20-minute speech about the book. I've read the book. I was given an advanced copy of the book, okay? So I'd like to just tell you how incredibly gripping this book was, okay? It's very, very fitting that we're doing this in Richmond Barracks, the historic Richmond Barracks. My own 1916 relation, Arthur Greene, was processed in that hall just down there. Okay. So, I'm an Easter Rights Stories filmmaker, as Darren has said. I've made 110 films, but I've made 8 or 9 films with Derek and Darren, where we've done the Battle of North King Street, the Battle of Main Street, and some of the Main Street relations are here today. Thank you very much for coming. And we've also done ones on Dan Breen and Sean Treacy. From 2014 to 2016, there were 270 books released relating to the 1916 Rising. Now I know I've seen them, you all queue up here, and it may go on your shelf, but will you read it? I'm going to implore you to read this book, because it's not just a good book. When Derek asked me what my opinion on this book was, I said, you've written a new chapter in Irish history. Now you can't say better than that, reading that, okay? But the thing is, Derek and Darren both said to me, there is unfinished business. 1916 is not over. By starting at the end of the surrender, okay, bringing you through to 1917, you automatically just unfold a tapestry of different emotions and feelings and what happened. What you realise is the fire never went out for many of them. They were incensed by how time and again British troops would attempt to slight and ridicule them. And rather than let it break them, they toughened, they strengthened, they were emboldened. The fight didn't end. They had principles and honour in terms of tolerating certain slights dished out. Now, if I was asked my opinion on what's my favourite 1916 book before I met these guys, it would have been Max Caulfield's Easter Rebellion, because it took you into the heart of it, what the volunteers were actually facing. Yes, there were leaders, but what were the volunteers actually doing, actually fighting? Okay, well, Clarke and Darren stood on the shoulders of giants, I think. I think they actually made it better, because they also brought in the British side. Also, the Bureau of Military History statements were released, and they very intelligently weaved together the story to all of a sudden bring in a new picture of what emerged. Now, the new book is Those of Us Who Must Die. Now, the thing is about this book, if I was to ask many 1916 relatives what the favourite book is, many have said it's Last Words. Now, if you haven't heard the Last Words, there's an exhibition in Cumain Jail about it. It's written by Pearson McLaughlin, who's a relative of Patrick Pearce. One of the things about this book is, again, I would argue that Derek and Darren have painstakingly researched and built on the last statements and words of the 1916 leaders by, again, bringing it in from the British point of view as well. So, not to take away from it, but to heighten it, to make it more dramatic of the story. So, Pearce McLaughlin, relative of Patrick Pearce, has written in his book Last Words, and he wrote this in the mid-60s. Time was when it was felt that the letters of the leaders to their near relatives were too intimate for them to be read by the public in general. But it will be accepted now, more than half a century later, 1966. Later, that having given their lives for Ireland, the leaders of the Rising, as indeed all who took part in it, have become part of our history. So that everything they did or said or wrote has a rightful place in the annals as well as in the hearts of the Irish people. Now, unfortunately, Pearce McLaughlin died when Last Word was being proofed. He was the editor and keeper of the Museum for the Cumain Jail Restoration Society. Yeah, he wouldn't have Cumain Jail if it wasn't for him. And organising secretary of the National Commemoration in 1966 of the 50th anniversary of the Rising. Those of Us Who Must Die, in my opinion, stands on the shoulders of Pearce McLaughlin's book Last Words. Now, let me just show you this. Just so you know, I wasn't just hired to do this and I don't really know what I'm talking about. This is when the clock struck, right? Look at all the highlighted pen, notes and marks in here. I've read this back to front, like the back of my hand. Now, Derek and Darren, their love of history is infectious. This is Derek on his Main Street tour along with Dave Swift. This was a tour that we had for a few months. And the first time I remember filming Derek on Main Street Bridge, I knew a bit of the story, I didn't know it all. And I remember when I was filming him, I actually put the camera down
I went, sorry, are you kidding me? Did this actually happen? Okay? Because I was amazed that all we heard about was the GPO. We didn't hear about anything else. But yet we have this incredible battle. 13 volunteers versus 1,600 British soldiers. Okay. Plenty more moments, okay? So, Darren was able to discuss how the guerrilla tactics are similar to those used in the Battle of Stalingrad, with sniper fire positioning, and also how the Battle of North King Street in 1916 was similar to some of the house-to-house fighting displayed in Fallujah in Iraq. And Darren can explain the tactics behind these decisions. This is our history, and it's an incredible history.
Now, let me show you this. I was given an advanced copy of Those of Us Who Must Die. Now again, just to prove that I have actually read this, look at this. Now, I know it doesn't look as full, but that's because the ink actually ran out. My highlighter pens, I use red pen, okay? Now, Those Who Must Die, like I say, begin where most books end. They begin at the surrender, and they take you through the heart-wrenching, often callous and horrific executions that the leaders face. But crucially, the most important thing that I found about this book wasn't actually about the leaders. It was about the volunteers who were on the ground and how they dealt with the treatment that was given to them. The fear of being sentenced, the not knowing, the humiliations, the lack of food, the beatings that they received, the mocking, separated by occasionally and warmly received acts of kindness by some in the British military. I was inspired by how men and women coped in these circumstances. The book brought out the spirit of the everyday volunteers in a way that was gripping and fast-paced. Little victories, verbal little victories, were bigger than that. They meant an awful lot more to them. It meant the fight was going to go on. We would only tolerate certain slights against us. The flames basically never went out. Now the strength of this book, one of the strengths of this book is how they dealt with the lack of official written records from the British side, where anonymity was given to both the soldiers and also to the officers that were involved. Derek and Darren have painstakingly trawled through available accounts from those who were there. This gives a fresh insight into how these historic events unfolded. Diaries and memoirs have also emerged from the British side, which only strengthens the accounts of the final moments of the 1916 leaders in Those of Us Who Must Die. By comparing shootings on the Western Front with the 1916 executions in Kilmainham, you can see with a few exceptions that a certain protocol was maintained. After the Rising, the Sheriff Foresters and South Staffordshires who were in 1916 would soon find themselves fighting on the fields of France during World War I. What happens in Kilmainham Jail and Richmond Barracks is as important a part to remember as the week before when they were fighting. You can see the decision to fight on being decided by the volunteers through their experiences after the surrender. They had fought bravely and with honour in many cases. The next step, though, was to see how they're going to be treated. But I'm going to just give you a little bit about Derek and Darren first. This is Derek and Darren in the Schoolhouse Hotel, and we got very drunk that night. But myself, like I say, we've made a number of films, but Derek and Darren helped you see just how fierce the fighting was in When the Clock Struck, and are able to compare the incredible battles, okay, to world events. To highlight the passion of Derek and Darren, I asked them what they wanted people to get out of the previous book, When the Clock Struck. Okay? And I would say, and I'm not joking when I say this, it is one of the best books on the Battle of 1916. But what Derek has said is, Dublin is a beautiful city. It's a vibrant city. The history just reverberates from its walls, even these walls. Okay? Probably the most important event that took place in Ireland and resounded throughout the world that took place on these streets. It's something that I don't think enough attention is paid to. I think that the powers that be have a tendency to apologise in case we might have offended somebody by doing what we did. You just have to respect people that went out and do what they did for something they believed in and were prepared for what they faced. One time when we were filming around at the schoolhouse, Derek was pointing out the bullet holes in the schoolhouse to a lady, American lady, and she was like, oh, it's like their Alamo. Okay? In other words, people can relate to this. They can relate to different battles and events, it just needs to be packaged correctly. Okay. This is what we have though. It's O'Connell Street, it's the Forecourt, it's the lanes of Muir Street, it's the South Dublin Union, it's the Mendicity Institute, it's Jacob's Factory, it's Stephen's Green. And you're all talking within 3 or 4 miles. This epic, fantastic story of the first time a modern army was actually drawn into a city that was filled full of civilians. It's got the drama of what they suffered. It's a story, again, that just needs to be told.
And now here I am, 101 years later. This is my relation, Arthur Greene. Okay? And he was a sergeant major of the Loud Volunteers.
And also, by the way, there are members here of the Tyrone Volunteers, and these are all stories that have got forgotten about, okay, outside of Dublin. Arthur Greene is processed through these walls of Richmond Barracks after partaking in Easter week, and not only is this a nice moment for me, but Darren and Darren actually helped me and encouraged me to co-write a book on the Loud Volunteers 1916 to get the story back out there. But here we're going to look at. When the Clock Struck in 1916 takes its titles from one of the greatest quotes of the Rising, by one of its greatest heroes, Theo Rattley. Since I helped to wind the clock, I've come to hear it strike, is what he said. Those of us who must die also borrows its title from a letter by Con Colbert. He has said, I am giving this to Mrs. Murphy for you. She'll not mind to hear of what's happening, and she'll get you all to pray for those of us who must die.
Now I'm going to really enjoy giving you a taster of what this book is about, so it doesn't just sit on your shelf. Okay.
Let's get started. Captain Percival Leah Wilson. When the volunteers were brought to the rotunda, the dying Joseph Plunkett had to be wrapped in 2 overcoats by Winifred Carney and Julia Grennan. Volunteers were packed onto the grass of the rotunda so tightly that some men had to lie on top of each other. They were not allowed to relieve themselves, and when volunteer Frank Henderson rose on his knees to urinate, he was struck in the back of the head with the butt of a rifle by a British officer, Captain Percival Leah Wilson. Leah Wilson had been drinking and shouted at his men if anyone wanted to see the animals. That's how they were seen by some. When Ned Daly asked the British non-commissioned officer for permission to reach his personal belongings on the ground, the NCO picked up the items himself and handed them to Daly. Very nice. But Leah Wilson ripped the epaulets from the shoulders of his tunic before ordering a nearby soldier to perform another search on him, which resulted in Ned Daly being stripped half naked. Leah Wilson was not over yet. Tom Clarke, the rebel leader and first name on the proclamation, was next to face Leah Wilson's sadism. Clarke was worn out and frail after the week and had been nursing a gunshot wound from before the rising. Leah Wilson had Tom Clarke stripped naked. When he noticed horrified nurses looking on, Leah Wilson screamed, "Nice general for your fucking army."
As Leah Wilson continued to verbally berate Clarke, Clarke leaned in and whispered something to the captain, which further enraged him, and Leah Wilson struck Clarke across the face with his glove. An angry cry came from the surrounding volunteers, who began to get up until they heard several unmistakable metallic clicks. Ned Daly tried to bring his men under his control to avert a massacre. Imagine the way history would have went if this had happened, if this had gone through. He screamed at his men, "Whom do you consider the worst, the Boche or the Sinn Féiners?" He asked the soldiers what they should do with them. To answers of shoot them, stick a bayonet in them. Next, Leah Wilson turned to Joe Plunkett. Plunkett's aide-de-camp was Michael Collins, and Michael Collins said in desperation, "This is a very sick man. Will you just leave him alone?" Leah Wilson, by the way, not over yet, also took Sean McDermott's walking stick from him, causing him to limp to Richmond Barracks the next day. A few years later, Michael Collins' network with Liam Tobin found and shot Leah Wilson.
The march to Richmond Barracks.
But where they broken after the humiliation in the rotunda, as they marched to Richmond Barracks, a low melodic hum began to be heard among the ranks of the volunteers to the tune of "God Save Ireland." Then more of them raised their heads. Soon the entire column were singing the old rebel song. Tears were held, defiance increased, nerves steeled. The volunteers were getting abuse hurled their way, just to the west of Christchurch, when civilians shouted that they were murderers or starvers of the people. British soldiers had to hold the mob back. In a few days, much of this public opinion, however, would change.
Lieutenant Oscar Traynor recalls a Capuchin monk standing outside the gates of Richmond Barracks, saying over and over the words Mishnah, Mishnah. Puzzled British officers didn't know what he was saying. They didn't realise that this word was the Irish for courage. Again, defiance. When other Irish volunteer battalions had been marched down past the South Dublin Union and towards Old Kilmainham, a single volunteer began to sing hoarsely, God Save Ireland. The tune was quickly picked up again by several hundred comrades. It also served as a poignant reminder of the bravery of Cathal Brugha, who sang God Save Ireland while taking on the British at one point single-handedly only the week before, thus motivating his troops to continue fighting. If you've ever seen the film The Bridge Over the River Kwai, you know, when they all start whistling to keep the motivation going, this has nothing on what happened in 1916. This actually happened. Now, mental games and acts of cruelty. British soldiers enjoyed trying to play mind games on the volunteers. From telling them they were digging graves all day, to placing them in blood-smeared cells. To when asked to be treated as prisoners of war, receiving a blow to the jaw with a baton, or threatening that they would be part of a firing party to execute them the next day. To robbing the Irish rebels of valuables and money as spoils of war. Or charging them for water. Indeed, Thomas Darren, who had been placed beside Joseph Plunkett due to exhaustion, woke up to find a young British soldier trying to pull a ring from Joseph Plunkett's finger. He was dying of tuberculosis. Plunkett, already weakened, refused, and eventually the soldier gave up. Also in Dublin Castle, 2 large pits had been dug. Some of the Royal Dublin Fusiliers sneered at the volunteers, saying, "In an hour's time, some of yous will be in it." Captain Richard McCormack of the rebels has said, "If I'm one of them, I'll call 3 cheers to the Irish Republic as they are about to shoot me." Most acts of cruelty committed by British officers in the Royal Irish were also occasionally peppered with kindness. A drunken member of the Royal Irish Fusiliers, when looking at another batch of volunteers, made to stand in the heat for hours on end, announced he was an Irishman, and was proud of what they did, and admired the way the volunteers had fought. He returned with 2 buckets of water and tin cups. The Royal Irish Fusilier didn't want money, but the volunteers were insisting, "No, take our money, it's fine." The Fusilier actually returned again. What did he return with? Cigarettes and biscuits. Now, the next thing is support. Support came from strange places. Okay, this is some of the more interesting, unique stories of 1916 you may not have heard about. For example, New Zealand. These are colonial New Zealand soldiers. Support came in strange places, like I say. The volunteers were surprised when the colonial troops from New Zealand cheered them on and wished them luck, but they were on the British side. Well, the reason was, New Zealanders had initially been told that the prisoners were mere arsonists, and not revolutionaries, and that they had set the city on fire because of an industrial dispute. And when they discovered the truth, they showed considerable enthusiasm for the bravado of the volunteers. They were feeding them with the best rations available, and suggesting boisterously that they themselves should organise something similar in New Zealand. Another person, Tony Macapaltis from Finland. I had to take my time pronouncing how to say that. Support also came from Finland by Tony. Tony was a Finnish sailor who had somewhat astonishingly convinced Captain Tannen to let him join the GPO garrison on Easter Monday. Why? I'll tell you why. His unorthodox intention had been to fight against the occupier of his own country, Russia, by proxy against its ally, Great Britain. Tannen, aware that they needed all the help they could get on the day, admitted him into the GPO. "Come on in, we need all the men we can get." Now the Finn was in Kilmainham jail. Macapaltis had a poor command of English, and when his turn came to be summoned to the room, he had a hard time understanding the interrogator's questions. Consequently, he didn't answer any of them, much to the officer's frustration. Now, here's another group that you would not expect in 1916 to be seen. 2 apprentice boys of Derry. were 1916 prisoners.
The volunteers also were joined in the surrender by some interesting acquaintances. Two of the prisoners were Derry apprentice boys and Orange men.
In other words, staunch loyalists. They had been rounded up in Dublin with about 10 other men who'd been mistaken for rebels. Now, when the pair heard several among their fellow prisoners reciting a rosary during the night, they apparently feared for their lives and banged on the door to get the guards' attention. How? There's Catholics in here. Okay? When he arrived, they told him they were Protestants and loyalists and had nothing to do with the rebellion.
The guard's response was to shoot them, or to threaten to shoot them. They persevered, however, insisting they were terrified. They were convinced that the other men in the cell, being Roman Catholics, would kill them when they finished praying. Their protest fell on deaf ears. They sat down to glares of disgust from their fellow captives,
who were appalled that they considered that they were in danger from them just because of their faith.
They were eventually freed when the absurdity of the situation was discovered. It would be quite embarrassing, the further went on. So, let's look at the 1916 executions. I'm not looking at all of them, I'm only looking at 2 or 3 of them, okay?
Now, Kathleen Clarke, okay, one of the things that's an advantage of this book, Those of Us Must Die, is it explores the exchanges that wives and families of those 1916 leaders who were sentenced to be executed had with the British. Kathleen Clarke, wife of Tom Clarke, was asked by a British official, why start a revolution? Well, Kathleen Clarke replied, think about this, if the Germans win the war and conquer England and subjugate the people, if this happened, don't you think, as an Englishman, he would rebel? Well, the British man said, I'm damn well sure he would. Well, Kathleen then added, can you have our point of view?
And one of the things as well about the executions is it wasn't just the executions that had swayed public opinion. You also had the news of what happened to civilians massacred on North King Street, which they wrote about very eloquently in their last book, When the Clock Struck, and he also made a film about it.
You also had news of what happened to civilians massacred on North King Street, news of the killing spree of British Captain Bowen Colthurst, and the murder of pacifist Francis Sheehy Skeffington, to contend with all along the mass rounding up of civilians ripped from their homes as suspects. The high civilian death toll also wasn't helping matters, so as well as the executions. Okay. So what we're going to look at is just a little bit about maybe the first 3.
Charles Blackader describes the sentencing of Patrick Pearse as one of the hardest things ever. That Pearse was one of the finest men he came across, and that he could see why his students loved him. Soon afterwards, 12 rifles were fired in unison as 11 .303 bullets smashed into Pearse's chest at twice the speed of sound, shattering his breastbone, his heart, his spine, his upper torso, and hurling his pulverized body backwards, killing him instantly. He collapsed on the blanket spread on the ground. This should not be romanticized. This should be just told as it is, what happened, warts and all. Okay. Thomas MacDonagh. Thomas MacDonagh's visitor, Sister Frances, placed a pair of rosary beads around his brother's neck. MacDonagh replied, no, they will shoot you to bits. Was all he was thinking about. Tom Clarke. Regarding the court trials, Tom Clarke told Sean McGarry that the charge of intention to help the enemy gave him the right to plead not guilty. The fact that the volunteers had asked the Germans for help was a simple matter of expediency. His death was one where he suffered. Clarke was hurled back by the force of the bullets. He collapsed in a heap on the ground sheet that had been replaced after the previous execution. But he had not been killed outright. He twitched and he groaned faintly where he lay, his bloodied, smashed torso riddled with rounds that had completely missed the white card that they were meant to aim at. The British soldiers were disturbed that the same firing party had been used for the first 3 executions. This was not common, usually they were changed over. But the one that really got my interest, one of the real horrific executions, for me, was that of David Kant. He wasn't standing when he was executed. You know when you have this vision that they're all standing? He wasn't. A large wooden soapbox had been placed in front of the sandbag wall. Kant was placed sitting on it. An officer asked him to stretch his legs out. This would steady the victim. and would make it less likely that any shots would miss the pinned on target. So Kant stretched out one leg at a time. Tragically, however, moments later, the efforts made to help ensure accuracy would prove futile. Kant's death, just like Tom Clarke's, would not be instantaneous. When the officer gave the signal, rifle fire shattered the silence. Kant tumbled backwards off the soapbox, groaning desperately. He was still alive. The firing squad had been unable to steady the rifles. Some of their shots missed the target altogether, smashing into the sandbags behind them. Those that hit him had failed to hit the white target, and instead struck his upper body haphazardly, creating multiple wounds. Captain Stanley ran forward, frantically panicking and signalling to the officer, but the officer didn't need the signal. He was already drawing his revolver and hurrying to the bound figure, twitching and moaning on the ground. Seconds later, he ended Kant's agony with a bullet to the head.
Now, there was some levity.
Okay, and there were mock court trials. You can imagine, volunteers just sitting around, they're bored. How are we going to kill time?
Well, instead of waiting for one court trial, let's do our own.
My great granduncle Arthur Breen has said in his witness statement after he was arrested and brought up to Dublin by train, we were thrown up in columns of 4 and taken under strong military escort to Richmond Barracks. 25 of us were put into a big room.
Amongst the men in the room were some Belfast men. We had to lie on the bare floor without bedclothes. The next day we got dog biscuits and black tea, bully beef and then a blanket each. We held a mock breach of promise case against one of our prisoners. I was the judge at that trial. But also, and this is where it gets really weird, right? Eamon de Valera was involved in another mock trial. In Richmond Barracks, Count Brugha and Commandant de Valera were having another court-martial. This was also a mock trial. It was lighted over by Count Plunkett. And if you remember, Joseph Plunkett, his son, was facing execution.
Sean T. O'Kelly acted as prosecutor and Larry Neal spoke for the defence. De Valera was the defendant. De Valera had been charged by his peers, wait till you hear this, with being a pretender to the throne of Molyneux. Molyneux? This sounds like something out of Lord of the Rings, right? But that Molyneux is the tiny island that's near Dalkey in Dublin. Okay, so that's what they're actually doing the mock trial about. But the case was presented as farce, you know, so to relieve tension. But until its conclusion, when reality actually hit home, because a prisoner then brought a piece of black cloth for him to wear as he pronounced the death sentence, but Count Plunkett stopped short. The atmosphere changed, a sense of foreboding quickly filling the room and dispelling all joviality. Soon afterwards, Larry O'Neill slid over to De Valera, muttered, "This is terrible," and pressed a small crucifix into De Valera's hand. Also remember, like I said, Count Plunkett had his sons that were arrested in Richmond Barracks and come in and he didn't know what was going to happen to them.
Now, just cattle ships and deportations. Many of the volunteers marched onto cattle ships for England to be placed in prisons or camps.
The journey for some was fraught with danger and not knowing their fate. Where are they going to be press gang into the Royal Navy? Or are they going to sink us in the sea and blame it on a German submarine? Very easy to do. One of the people who had an awful time in terms of travelling over was Fergus the Bird, Frank Burke. The volunteers' treatment like that of an animal continued while on the cattle ships. Those of us who must die tell his story, who eventually he had to give into the filth beneath his feet. He was on a cattle ship, okay? You can imagine what it was like. No longer able to stand from exhaustion and racked with sickness due to the stench, he sat down on the fetid floor. The man behind did the same until the two men's backs supported each other.
The Burke began to doze, thinking that he no longer cared what happened. Buckets of water were then given to the men in the cargo holds, most of the contents being spilled as they were passed down. This luxury, though, was denied to those who were in the cattle holds. They would have to drink from the dirty troughs. Now, just a little bit about Frongoch and Thomas Ashe, and that'll be it. Okay. After the book delves deeply into the volunteers' journey of exile to England and Wales and camps and prison, it is very easy just to cite it as the University of Revolution, and then just move on like it's a nice little holiday camp. It was anything but, it was horrific. Any complaints about prison conditions, however, merely resulted in bread and water punishments in Dartmoor. Harry Bowen was regularly punished. He appeared wholly unable, to observe the rule of silence. Just couldn't stay quiet. You know people in school, you always have an answer. Harry Bowen was one of them. His gregarious charm, however, endeared him to everyone in the prison, including the chief warder, who actually took a liking to his irrepressible lightheartedness.
Now, one more thing about Frongoch, okay? This is a really interesting point. In Frongoch, Michael Collins organised a lot of mischief, creating as much distraction and irritation for his captors as he possibly could. On one occasion, the entire complement of prisoners insisted on a full medical exam all at the same time. After much furore, the demand was finally agreed to. Now the camp doctors in Frongoch, somewhat to their astonishment, determined that there was not a single case of venereal disease amongst the 1,800 Irish volunteers who had been examined one after the other. Good Irish boys. A comedy joke afterwards that consequently their prisoner of war status no longer applied. They could not be recognised as an authentic military force until at least some of them had symptoms of ED. Now, those of us who must die also takes us on the journey back to Dublin, where instead of having insults thrown at them, the volunteers began again under new leadership. The death of Thomas Ashe on hunger strike would only serve to attract more to their cause, and his anniversary is only a few days away. So here he is, the death of Thomas Ashe, the last 1916 leader. This is the real link between 1916 and the War of Independence. His death features prominently in the book, Those of Us Who Must Die. Look at the success Thomas Ashe had in 1916 and how his tactics were employed by fighters the likes of Sean Treacy, Dan Breen, Tom Barry and Bernie O'Malley later in the War of Independence as they attacked RIC bases and used flying columns to their advantage. Ashe had done it in the Battle of Ashburn in 1916. Ashe is the link. It was him, De Valera and Thomas Hunter who weren't executed in 1916 despite having a leading role. And also in 1917, he was head of the IRB. In other words, he knew what was really going on if you're in the IRB. Thomas Ashe was the last 1916 leader to die by British hands. This last death by a botched force meeting during hunger strike turned 100,000 people who were only interested in constitutional nationalism into 100,000 Sinn Féiners. His death did huge damage to John Redmond's Irish Parliamentary Party. He really did prophesy correctly that he would carry the cross for Ireland. Now, one thing Darren mentioned was I'm a filmmaker, so I thought, right, I'm going to mention some films to do your book, right? One documentary that I've seen, 5 came back, okay, is about the story of these 5 filmmakers. Frank Capra, John Huston, John Ford, okay, and a number of others, who all filmed World War II. Okay, and one of the things that was really interesting about this was Steven Spielberg was interviewed. And what did he say about recording history? Well, Steven Spielberg said so much of the horrible truth of the war was just removed from our culture. Almost in order to take a big deep breath and look forward into the future. But I've always been a big believer that you can't move forward into the future unless you have a complete solid basis of understanding and empathy about the past. Again, Those of Us Who Must Die achieves this. It lifts the lid and lets you sit with the volunteers as they try to overcome the boredom and the nerves and replace it with that defining hope. John Huston has also said in his film about post-traumatic stress disorder, Let There Be Light in World War II, the hope was then to create a better understanding, not sugar-coated, but honest and straightforward. And that is what they have done with this book, to their credit. To conclude, what do we owe the past? Do we really stop and think about the sacrifices our grandparents and great-grandparents had to suffer? Do you think they wanted to know that it was easy? And that we should just glance over the treatment that they had and mistreatment that they had to endure? Because they recorded the slides in the witness statements. They wanted us to remember them. And what happened? This isn't a pretty book that glamorises what happened. The book takes you into the cells where the clothes of the 1916 leaders were covered in sweat, where the room had the stench of urine and shit, where those who would die would be trying to carefully dwell on their best memories and rest with overcoming their fears. W.B. Yeats has carved on his tombstone, cast a cold eye on life, on death, horsemen pass by. die? Well, I feel that Those of Us Who Must Die is a book sums up that famous line of poetry. The only difference being if Derek and Darren were the horsemen, they didn't pass by. They got off the horses with magnifying glasses coupled with such a depth of research, military knowledge and a manner of writing that grips you by the throat and doesn't let you go. Those of Us Who Must Die lifts up the stark cobwebs and in my opinion triumphs for casting a cool eye on life and on death. Reading this book, I was moved, impressed by the spirit of many of the men in such dire circumstances, gripped by a roller coaster of drama, passion, and heroism.
It takes you into the nitty-gritty.
The volunteers remembered the slights, the indignities, the attempted mental torture, which only served to embolden them in their witness statements. They knew their witness statements wouldn't be seen until they were dead, and they wanted us to remember just how bad it was. They are included in their own witness statements for a reason, as I said before. Those of Us Who Must Die doesn't tell you how to think. It presents the facts as they are and it treats you like an adult and you can make up your own mind. We need those of us who must live to read this groundbreaking book and to help remember the stories from those of us who must die. We need the preservation of our history to help ignite the passion of a new generation of historians.
This book shines a critical light over what has often been overlooked and only treated as a footnote.
The Irish men and women are the finest throughout. Like I say, it's a new chapter in the story of the Irish Revolution. This book is astounding. It's brilliant. It's a gem. Now go do these guys a favour and please buy it and spread the word. Thank you very much.